Ever since wrapping up Jamie's story in Season 1 of the Random Survivors series, I've gotten a steady stream of comments asking about, "You need superb survivors." Well, yes, that comment, and also people inquiring about, "Have you ever considered doing one of these random characters in a multiplayer game?" That also, and I totally understand the appeal. I would love to interact with other survivors just as much as, "Can you try the NPC mod next season? You should add superb survivors with raiders that attack your base." Any chance of ones with more than one character? Would you ever consider using the superb survivors mod? They're not too. It would be really cool if you used the superb survivors mod to add more characters. I feel like it would be cool. I imagine the next step is multiplayer. I wonder if you could use multiplayer for the third season and have it be either a set of best friends. But do you have anyone who could do a multiplayer version with you? Because I could see some really depressing scenarios play out. For example, I'm curious, once you consider adding survivor NPCs and raids to your game, how the story would be impacted. Yeah, I've gotten a handful of these comments over the last couple months, and I've tried to answer all of them, but I think it's about time I made a dedicated video explaining my perspective. I'll warn you that there are spoilers for both seasons in this video, so if you don't want to hear them, feel free to come back to this once you've finished watching them. Anyway, let's first tackle multiplayer and why it just doesn't work. So what you're looking at is side-by-side footage from one of my many attempts to do a co-op story for the upcoming season. The reason I'm including this clip is to show that both perspectives are perfectly synced as far as the server is concerned, so the discrepancies that you see on screen are what we're dealing with in real time. Already, you can begin to see the minor problems in the footage, as neither of us are accurately portrayed on the other's screen, as we simply move about. Right now this appears harmless, but as we continue, I'll show how it can quickly snowball into a genuine problem. Right off the bat with our first zombie encounter, another common issue of Zomboid multiplayer rears its ugly head. Despite the still obvious desync going on with the combat, the new issue is how zombies are shown based on which character they're targeted onto. Right now the zombie in the red shirt is chasing after me, and even though the other players should easily be able to see him, the server hasn't sent that information to their client yet, rendering him invisible on their screen. I imagine this is to help increase performance, where the server prioritizes rendering zombies that aren't fixated on you, but it often leads to situations where other players are fighting ghosts, which not only looks incredibly janky for footage, but makes fighting effectively very difficult. Showcasing exactly why working together is so difficult, let's break down this relatively minor encounter in the alleyway. First, look at this freeze frame. It's important because it can show just how different a situation can be perceived based off the desync we're working with. On the right, from my view, I'm in far more danger than what is being shown to my partner on the left. This is relatively harmless when dealing with just two enemies, but I'll show you just how chaotic this can get when fighting with larger groups. Another aspect I wanted to highlight, and this is a problem that affects the footage more than the gameplay, is the incredibly strange behavior of the zombie AI in multiplayer. I'm about to slow down the footage, and I want you to watch this zombie in the dress very carefully. It is clear as day that our clients and the server are conflicting over who she's targeting, and it causes her to glide, spin, and jitter around in an incredibly obnoxious way. Again, ignoring the obnoxiousness of this in-game, my bigger gripe is how unimmersive the footage looks with the distracting behavior going on. It might not appear to be a large problem, but it's incredibly difficult to keep a sense of genuine danger when goofy scenes like this fly in the face of the story you're trying to tell. While a few more goofy clips play in the background, let me give you my thoughts. At this point, you might be saying that none of these problems are show-stopping, and they can easily be overlooked when consuming similar content. While I don't entirely disagree with you, the point I want to try and stress is that the style of content you've come to enjoy on my channel would be actively harmed by these seemingly minor blemishes. Importantly, my content is unscripted, which means that there's no reshooting scenes unless it has been actively prepared for. Using the interaction between Kevin and Jules as an example of how I can implement other survivors into the story, you have to understand that the final product you saw wasn't our first attempt. There were multiple times that I had to reload from a prepared save because of a general zomboid shenanigan, anything ranging from vehicles glitching out, players being invisible, and zombies popping in and out of existence made a lot of our initial takes unusable. Once we finally got a take we were satisfied with, that's the story we decided to tell, but there's no feasible way to implement that strategy when it comes to an interaction lasting longer than a handful of scenes. The bittersweet conclusion for all of this is that I am looking forward to including more characters in the series going forward, but a truly cooperative or long-lasting companion is just too much of a logistical nightmare to implement. While these other characters might come in the form of other players in a multiplayer environment, I do also want to experiment with hopping around from one perspective to another in upcoming seasons. A great example from a previous story would be Jamie and Devon's interaction, where perhaps the story could have benefited from hopping over to Devon's point of view from time to time. Ultimately, I want the same thing as all of you. There is a wealth of amazing stories that could be told with other survivors being a part of the series, and it truly gets me irritated that my plans for a co-op Season 3 didn't pan out. I do want to conclude this section by mentioning that both I and my moderator Sean have put a great deal of effort into testing, troubleshooting, tweaking, and revising playing together. I can confidently say that I have tried everything I can think of to make this work, and have only now admitted defeat as I'm faced with several hours of unusable footage. So while I imagine some of you might be eager to comment some fix or suggestion I haven't tried yet, I'd ask that you trust my judgment and understand that this scenario just isn't possible until Zomboid's multiplayer sees some vast optimization. But with that out of the way, let me quickly cover Superb Survivors and the many reasons it will never be added to the series. First, I want to say that I did experiment with this mod between Seasons 1 and 2, but didn't bother recording any of the footage as I quickly concluded the mod didn't fit the style of the series at all. That being said, all footage I'm using as examples is not my own, and I recommend checking out their original videos in the description below. Now, the first thing I want to bring up is just how horrifyingly empty the NPCs in this mod are. They move around like drones, they clutter up the screen, they don't interact with the player in any meaningful way, and more or less just serve as pets rather than human beings. Along with that, any footage with this mod is horrendous when it comes to immersion and believability, which isn't a requirement for good Project Zomboid content, but simply doesn't work for the style of content that I like to produce. To give you an example, try replacing the climactic gunfight between Kevin and Jules at the end of Season 2 with this. Or even this. This concept doesn't just apply to raiders and gunfights, however, as it also severely kneecaps any sort of weight a story about surviving might have. Imagine you've been struggling to get by on your own for days. You're craving the simplicity of human contact, and finally you spot a living soul in the distance, just for the interaction to boil down to this. I do want to make it clear that I think this is an impressive mod that certainly has taken a great deal of effort, but it is simply not built for a narrative-heavy, grounded series like the videos I produce. And because I know there will be those of you who want to again suggest different ways of applying this mod, please know that I probably have done far more research than is healthy. Just like with the multiplayer, I really did want this mod to work for the series, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't. So, to fully conclude all my thoughts, I do genuinely appreciate everybody who has shown interest in the series and is excited to make it better. I understand that's the source of all these recommendations, and I, right alongside you, wish that these avenues were more viable. Despite this disappointment, however, I will continue to forge ahead and try and craft stories that both engage and entertain you. Perhaps as the game develops or my style changes, we can revisit these ideas in the future, but for right now, I have to work within the limitations in the moment. For those of you waiting on Season 3 of the Random Survivor series, rest assured that project is next on my list, and I simply wanted to put this video together to both vent some of my frustrations with the game and answer a multitude of questions I get regularly. Until next time, my fellow survivors, have a good one.